My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. 3 days before Christmas, my mother called to uninvite me from the family gathering. We all discussed it, Rebecca. Everyone agrees you're not welcome this year. Her voice was cold, detached. After 15 years of managing my parents' finances, investments, and properties while my siblings contributed nothing, I finally had enough. While she was still talking, I logged into their accounts and froze everything. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, credit lines, all of it. What Mom didn't know was that Christmas was just the beginning of what I had planned. If you've ever felt that moment when family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife could, I'd love to know where you're watching from. The holidays bring out both the best and worst in families, and this story might make you reconsider your own family dynamic. Take a second to hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself, and let's dive into how I went from family doormat to finally claiming my worth. Growing up as the responsible child in the Mitchell family was a role I never asked for, but somehow always had. From an early age, I was the organized one, the planner, the one who made sure homework was done, while my siblings lived consequence-free lives. My parents, Elaine and Harold Mitchell, made no secret of their favorites. James, my older brother, was the golden child despite his constant stream of half-baked business schemes that never materialized into anything. My younger sister Amanda was the baby, perpetually finding herself through an endless parade of college majors that our parents happily funded. Meanwhile, I maintained a 4 gigapascals throughout high school and college, working part-time jobs to help pay my way, only to receive the bare minimum of acknowledgement. "That's nice, Rebecca," my mother would say absently when I showed her my report card, before turning back to Amanda's latest crisis or James's newest venture. I remember once, at my high school graduation, my father checked his watch 3 times during my valedictorian speech, anxious to get to James's apartment warming party afterward. I graduated with a finance degree from Northwestern, near the top of my class. Several firms in Chicago offered me positions, but I took a modest job at a local investment firm to stay close to home. My parents were getting older, and despite everything, I felt responsible for them. "Such a shame you're settling," my mother commented when I told her about my new position. James would have gone for the big money in the city. The fact that James had never held a job for longer than 6 months apparently didn't factor into her assessment. Everything changed when I was 24. My father's construction business, which he ran with his partner Frank Donovan for nearly 30 years, suddenly collapsed. Frank had been embezzling funds for years, and when he finally disappeared to Mexico, he left my father holding the bag. Millions in debt, angry clients, and potential lawsuits. My parents were shell-shocked, facing bankruptcy, and possibly losing their home. I stepped in immediately. Using my financial expertise, I restructured their debt, negotiated with creditors, and created payment plans. I spent nights and weekends poring over their finances, finding tax deductions they'd missed for years, and setting up a sustainable budget. Within 6 months, I had saved them from complete financial ruin. But I didn't stop there. I realized their financial situation was too complex for them to manage, especially with my father's health declining after the stress of his business collapse. I created Mitchell Family Holdings, LLC, a limited liability company through which I could legally manage their assets while protecting them from future liability. I became the financial manager of their entire portfolio, the family home, 3 rental properties my grandfather had left them, their retirement accounts, and what was left of the business. For the next 8 years, I devoted at least 15 hours every week to managing my family's finances, on top of my full-time job. I turned their 3 neglected rental properties into consistent income streams by renovating and finding reliable tenants. I diversified their investment portfolio, which had previously been dangerously concentrated in a few volatile stocks. I even helped my father negotiate the sale of his remaining business assets to provide a cushion for their retirement. Every month, I organized family meetings to go over the financial reports. I created color-coded spreadsheets and simplified explanations, trying to help them understand where their money was and how it was growing. My father would nod off halfway through, my mother would check her phone. James would interrupt with irrelevant questions about getting funds for his latest scheme, while Amanda would doodle in her notebook, asking occasionally if there was extra money for her latest educational pursuit or European trip. Despite their indifference, I grew their net worth by nearly 40% over those 8 years. I took no compensation for my time, expertise, or effort. Not a single dollar. When friends asked why I did it, I would shrug and say, "They're family." But the truth was more complicated. I hoped that by proving my worth this way, I would finally earn the recognition and appreciation I'd always craved from them. Last year, after saving diligently for a decade, I purchased my dream condo in a lovely neighborhood 15 minutes from my parents' home. It wasn't extravagant. 2 bedrooms with a small office space and a balcony overlooking a park. But it was mine, bought with my own money, a testament to my hard work. When I invited my family for a housewarming dinner, their reactions were telling. "It's nice," my mother said with a tight smile, "but couldn't you have found something cheaper and saved the rest? You know, James might need investors for his new tech startup." "Pretty small kitchen for someone who claims to love cooking," Amanda commented, running her finger along my new countertop as if checking for dust. My father simply asked if I'd considered the tax implications and whether I'd be able to sell it quickly when the market turns. Not if, when. Their subtle disapproval stung, but I was used to it. What I didn't realize was how deeply they resented my financial independence, seeing it as money that could have gone to the family pool. Money that I had earned, saved, and invested carefully was somehow seen as resources unfairly withheld from James and Amanda. The personal sacrifices I'd made for my family went well beyond time and money. 3 years ago, I was engaged to Nathan, an architect I'd met at a client event. We dated for 2 years, and he proposed on a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. 2 months later, my father had a minor heart attack, and my mother insisted I move back home temporarily to help care for him. 2 months turned into 6, and Nathan grew increasingly frustrated with my family's constant demands on my time. Eventually, he gave me an ultimatum: set boundaries with my family, or end our engagement. Torn between my duty to my parents and my future with Nathan, I made the choice I'd been conditioned all my life to make. I chose family. Nathan returned the ring, and I watched my chance at happiness walk away. For months after that, I threw myself even more deeply into managing the family finances, as if proving my worth through spreadsheets and investment returns could fill the hole in my heart. It was around that time that I first noticed the whispers. James and Amanda, heads bent together in the kitchen, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Significant glances exchanged over dinner. Something was brewing beneath the surface, but I was too busy making sure everyone else was taken care of to pay much attention to the warning signs. If I had been more attentive, perhaps I would have seen what was coming. But I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the fixer, the one who made sacrifices. I never imagined that the very people I had sacrificed everything for would be plotting my exclusion all along. Thanksgiving this year should have been like any other. A tense family gathering at my parents' estate, the same 5-bedroom colonial I had helped them keep when they nearly lost it all. I arrived early to help my mother with the cooking, as I always did. The house looked immaculate, as it should. I'd arranged for a cleaning service twice monthly as part of the household budget I managed. Around 2 o'clock, the gravel driveway crunched with the sound of tires. I looked out the kitchen window to see James pulling up in a brand-new Mercedes SUV, easily a $90,000 vehicle. I frowned, mentally calculating his known income sources. There was no way he could afford this car unless something had changed dramatically in his financial situation. "When did James get a new car?" I asked my mother casually as I arranged the sweet potato casserole in the oven. "Oh, he's doing very well with his new business contacts," she replied vaguely, avoiding eye contact. "The consulting is really taking off." I nodded, though I knew perfectly well that James's consulting business had generated less than $20,000 in the last fiscal year. I had done his taxes. 10 minutes later, Amanda arrived in an Uber, laden with shopping bags from high-end boutiques. She bounced into the kitchen wearing a designer dress I recognized from a recent magazine spread, at least $2,000 retail. "Hey, family," she squealed, dropping her bags to give our mother an enthusiastic hug. "I brought wine and gifts from Switzerland. Carl sends his love." Carl was Amanda's latest boyfriend, a Swiss graduate student she'd met during her third attempt at a master's degree, this time in international relations at a private university in Geneva, an education I knew our parents couldn't afford on their own. "How lovely, darling," my mother cooed, examining the expensive wine and chocolate Amanda had brought. "Rebecca, could you put these away while Amanda freshens up?" I smiled tightly and took the bags, noting the prices still attached to some items. As I stored the chocolate in the pantry, I overheard Amanda and my mother whispering in the hallway. "Did you tell her anything?" Amanda asked. "Of course not," my mother replied. "We agreed to wait until after the holidays. James says sooner is better, before she suspects. Your brother always rushes things. We need to be careful how we approach this." I froze, my hand still on the pantry door. They went silent as my father entered the hallway, and I quickly busied myself with the dinner preparations, my mind racing. What were they planning? What didn't they want me to suspect? Throughout the afternoon, I noticed the strange tension in the house. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. James and Amanda exchanged meaningful glances. My parents seemed unusually attentive to James's stories about his business prospects, nodding and asking questions they'd never bothered with before. Dinner started normally enough. My father carved the turkey I had cooked, everyone filled their plates, and the usual small talk began. Amanda dominated the conversation with tales of her European adventures, while James periodically checked his phone as if expecting important messages. It was during dessert that everything changed. "So," James said, setting down his fork with an air of importance, "I wanted to talk to everyone about an exciting new opportunity. I've been working with some tech developers on an app that's going to revolutionize the real estate market." He launched into a detailed explanation about property valuation algorithms and user interfaces that I could tell he barely understood himself. "The thing is," he continued, looking directly at me for the first time that evening, "we need angel investors to get to the next level. We're looking for about 200,000 to secure the patent and develop the prototype." I felt everyone's eyes on me. This wasn't the first time James had pitched a can't-miss business opportunity. I'd analyzed at least 6 of his previous ventures, all of which had fundamental flaws in their business models. I'd even invested $30,000 of my own money in one of his earlier ideas, money I never saw again. "That sounds interesting," I said carefully, "but I'd need to see the business plan, financial projections, and meet the development team before considering any investment." James's face darkened. "Always the skeptic, aren't you, Becky? Some of us have vision beyond spreadsheets." "It's not about vision, James. It's about due diligence. You're asking for a significant investment." "I'm not asking you for your money," he snapped. "I'm talking about using some of the family funds, the investment accounts you've been managing." I blinked in surprise. "Those accounts are Mom and Dad's retirement funds. They're not venture capital for high-risk startups." "There you go again," Amanda chimed in, rolling her eyes. "Controlling everything, deciding what's best for everyone. You act like it's your money." "I'm not controlling anything," I replied, feeling defensive. "I'm managing these accounts at Mom and Dad's request, and my responsibility is to make sure they're secure for their future." "Oh, please," James scoffed. "You love having that power over all of us, the family gatekeeper." I looked to my parents for support, but they sat silently, staring at their plates. "Mom, Dad," I said, "you know I've only ever tried to protect your financial interests. The investment strategy we agreed on doesn't include high-risk ventures." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, Rebecca, perhaps we should be a bit more open to James's ideas. After all, sometimes you have to take risks to see returns." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "The portfolio I've built has averaged 8% annual returns for 8 years straight. That's exceptional performance with minimal risk." "And what about my education?" Amanda interjected. "I've been accepted to that PhD program in Paris I told you about. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the tuition and living expenses are quite high." "How high?" I asked, already dreading the answer. About 70,000 a year for 3 years, she replied, as if discussing pocket change. But it's an investment in my future. My head was spinning. Between James's startup and Amanda's PhD, they were casually discussing spending nearly $500,000 of our parents' retirement savings. This is crazy, I said finally. These funds aren't a family ATM. They're specifically structured for mom and dad's long-term security. See? James turned to our parents. I told you she wouldn't help. She's been skimming from those accounts for years, building her own nest egg while keeping us on an allowance. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. What did you just say? Oh, come on, James continued, gaining momentum. You think we haven't noticed? Your fancy condo? Your investment portfolio? Where do you think the family thinks that money came from? You're making $60,000 a year at your job, but living like you make twice that. I saved. I invested carefully. I lived frugally for years while you were blowing through cash like it was nothing. I felt my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. Right? Amanda said sarcastically. So righteous. Meanwhile, you've been transferring small amounts from the family accounts for years. James had a friend at the bank check. I was speechless. Not only was the accusation completely false, but if James had indeed had someone check the accounts, that was potentially illegal access. That's absolutely untrue, I said, pulling out my phone. I have records of every single transaction I've ever made on behalf of mom and dad. Every penny is accounted for and documented. I pulled up the secure files I maintained meticulously and held out my phone. See for yourself. Here are the complete statements for the past 8 years. My authorization forms, the growth charts. I have never taken a single cent that wasn't mine. My mother barely glanced at the phone. Put that away, Rebecca. This isn't the time or place. When is the time, then? I asked, my voice shaking. When my own brother is accusing me of stealing from you? You're overreacting, my father said. James is just concerned about family resources being fairly distributed. Fairly distributed? I repeated incredulously. I have spent thousands of hours managing your finances for free. I saved you from bankruptcy. I grew your net worth by 40%. I've never asked for anything in return. Except control, James interjected. You love keeping us all dependent on your approval for every financial decision. I looked around the table at their faces. James smug, Amanda self-righteous. My parents uncomfortable, but clearly siding with their other children. In that moment, I realized a devastating truth. They had already decided to believe James over me, despite all evidence to the contrary. Years of loyalty and service meant nothing compared to the stories they wanted to believe. Without another word, I stood up, gathered my purse and coat, and walked out. No one tried to stop me. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision. When I reached my condo, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, trying to process what had just happened. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected, despite the warning signs I'd ignored, that I couldn't quite grasp it. That night, I called my friend Stephanie, who happened to be an attorney specializing in family law and financial matters. I explained the situation through intermittent sobs. First, she said firmly, you need to document everything. Every accusation made, everyone present, exact quotes if possible. I wrote everything down while it was still fresh in my mind. Second, she continued, you need to understand your legal position here. You've been acting as their financial manager through a legally established LLC, correct? Yes. Everything is properly documented and filed. That's good. It gives you significant protection. You have a fiduciary duty to your parents as clients, but you also have rights as the manager of their accounts. What should I do now? I asked. Take a step back. Review all your documentation. Make sure everything is in order. And seriously consider whether you want to continue in this role if this is how they treat you. She was right. For 8 years, I had prioritized my family's needs above my own, sacrificing my time, energy, and even a chance at love with Nathan. And this was my reward. Accusations and betrayal. As Thanksgiving weekend progressed, I made a decision. I would start focusing on my own life. I would maintain my professional obligations to my parents' accounts, but I would no longer go above and beyond at the expense of my own happiness. Little did I know that this resolution would be tested sooner and more severely than I could have imagined. But there was one bright spot that emerged from this dark period. Through a work colleague, I met Michael, a financial analyst who had recently moved to the area. Unlike Nathan, who had never fully understood my sense of family obligation, Michael had dealt with complex family dynamics of his own. Our coffee meetings to discuss professional matters gradually evolved into dinners, and for the first time in years, I felt understood rather than judged for my family situation. You know, he told me during one of our early dates, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst behaviors, even when that someone is family. His words would prove prophetic in the weeks to come. In the weeks following the Thanksgiving disaster, I maintained a polite but distant relationship with my family. I still managed their accounts professionally, but I stopped calling daily to check in, declined Sunday dinners, and focused on my own life and budding relationship with Michael. Then the warning signs began. The first red flag appeared when I received notification alerts from several investment accounts. Someone had attempted to access them using incorrect passwords. The IP address traced back to James's apartment building. When I called the investment firm, they confirmed that someone claiming to be Harold Mitchell had called requesting access, but couldn't answer the security questions. A week later, Amanda called the family accountant, Ronald Peters, asking for copies of tax documents and account statements. Fortunately, Ron had been working with me for years and called to verify before sending anything. She said your father had authorized her as a new contact on the accounts, Ron told me. But I don't have any paperwork showing that. Because no such paperwork exists, I confirmed. Thank you for checking with me. The monthly family financial meeting, which I still conducted out of professional obligation, was particularly strange. My parents, usually disinterested in the details, suddenly wanted only the basics. No need for all those complex reports, my father said casually. Just give us the account numbers, current balances, and access information. I provided the balances, but explained that for security reasons, I couldn't simply hand over all access credentials in a single document. Don't you trust us? My mother asked, her tone wounded. After all, there are accounts. It's not about trust, I explained. It's about financial security protocols. The accounts are structured with specific access controls to protect them. They dropped the subject, but I noticed my father taking detailed notes for the first time in years. I began documenting every unusual activity meticulously. James attempting to reset passwords, Amanda contacting financial institutions, my parents' sudden interest in technical account details. Something was clearly happening, and my instincts told me to be prepared. Then came the text messages from extended family. My cousin Emily sent a casual inquiry. Will you be at the big Christmas gathering? Mom wants to know for the seating arrangement. This was odd because Christmas was always held at my parents' house, and we never had assigned seating. When I called Emily to clarify, she seemed confused. Oh, Aunt Elaine told my mom they were doing something different this year. More formal, I guess. A week later, I received the official Christmas party invitation in the mail. On the envelope, handwritten in my mother's distinctive script, were the words, "Family only." It seemed like an odd thing to specify on an invitation to a family member. The pieces started coming together when I stopped by my parents' house, unexpectedly one afternoon, to drop off some tax documents that needed signatures. I let myself in with my key and heard my mother on the phone in the kitchen. We need to handle this carefully, she was saying in a hushed tone. Rebecca has been managing these accounts for years. We can't just, yes, I know what James thinks, but we need to be strategic. I quietly backed out of the house and left the documents in the mailbox instead, sending a text that I'd dropped them off. The final confirmation came when I was remotely backing up my father's computer, something I did quarterly as part of their overall financial security plan. In his email drafts folder, I found a message to their lawyer, Thomas Wilson, inquiring about changing power of attorney documents and removing me as the manager of Mitchell Family Holdings, LLC. The email mentioned a meeting scheduled for December 26th, the day after Christmas, to implement the changes once we have all the necessary information. My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to remove me from my role as their financial manager. They were timing it specifically to extract all the information they could from me at Christmas, then make the change immediately after. I called my own financial advisor, Melissa Chang, for an emergency consultation. "Based on what you're telling me," she said after hearing the details, "it sounds like they're planning a complete takeover of the accounts, potentially without proper transition or acknowledgement of your years of service." "What should I do to protect myself?" I asked. "First, secure copies of all documentation showing your authorization and work over the years. Statements, growth charts, communications, everything. Second, prepare for the possibility that you may need to abruptly transition out of this role. Have a clear inventory of all accounts and your involvement with each." I spent the next weekend doing exactly that, creating secure digital and physical copies of everything related to my family's finances and my role managing them. The emotional toll was immense. Every new discovery felt like another betrayal. These were the people I had sacrificed everything for, the ones I had chosen over my own happiness time and again, and now they were conspiring behind my back, planning to cut me out as soon as they had extracted what they needed from me. Michael was my rock during this period. Unlike friends who simply told me to cut ties with my family immediately, he understood the complexity of the situation. "You've built an identity around being their caretaker," he observed one evening as we sat on my balcony. "It's not just about the accounts. It's about who you are if you're not the responsible daughter anymore." His insight struck me deeply. Who was I if not the family fixer? What would my life look like if I fully prioritized my own needs? These questions both terrified and excited me. Despite everything, I still couldn't quite believe they would go through with cutting me out entirely. Maybe they just wanted more control over their own finances, which was reasonable. Maybe James had manipulated them temporarily, but they would come to their senses. I decided to attend the Christmas gathering, despite the tension, to confront the issues directly and see if there was a path forward that respected everyone's needs and my contributions. In the days leading up to Christmas, I purchased thoughtful gifts for everyone. For my father, a rare first edition of his favorite Ernest Hemingway novel. For my mother, a cashmere scarf from the designer she loved, but could never justify purchasing. For James and Amanda, gift cards to their favorite restaurants. If this was to be our last family Christmas as I had known it, I would at least uphold my end of the family obligations. 2 days before Christmas, I received a strange email from Thomas Wilson, the family lawyer, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss Mitchell Family Holdings matters. The email specified that I should bring all relevant access information to ensure a smooth transition of information. The lawyer's office was normally closed between Christmas and New Year's, making the timing of this request particularly suspicious. I politely replied that I was available after the new year for any properly scheduled transitions, which would need to include formal documentation and proper procedures. His response came quickly. "The Mitchell family has expressed urgency in this matter. If you're unavailable to meet, please forward all access credentials and documentation to me directly." I did not respond. No legitimate financial or legal professional would ever request security credentials via email. This confirmed that whatever was happening, it wasn't following proper protocols. As Christmas Eve approached, my anxiety peaked. I had a growing certainty that I was walking into a trap by attending the family gathering, yet I still clung to the hope that direct communication could resolve the situation. Michael urged me to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. "Just remember," he said, "you've done nothing wrong. You've acted with integrity for years. Whatever happens, hold on to that truth." Little did I know that the very next day would bring the final breaking point, the moment that would change my relationship with my family forever. If you've ever watched your family slowly turn against you while you were still helping them, you understand that special kind of betrayal. That feeling when you realize all those whispers suddenly stop when you enter the room. Have you ever had to decide between protecting yourself and maintaining peace? Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. I was about to face the hardest call of my life. 3 days before Christmas, on the morning of December 22nd, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering, steeling myself for whatever fresh tension awaited. "Hello, Mom," Rebecca. Her voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "No, hello. No, how are you?" Just my name, pronounced like an accusation. "Is everything okay?" I asked, genuine concern mixing with apprehension. "I'm calling about Christmas," she said, her tone clipped and formal as if speaking to a stranger. "There's been a change of plans." "Oh? What kind of change?" I was standing in my kitchen, morning coffee forgotten on the counter. There was a pause then. "We all discussed it, Rebecca. Everyone agrees you're not welcome this year." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out as a whisper. "What do you mean I'm not welcome? This isn't working anymore. Your controlling behavior, your constant interference in family finances, James and Amanda feel uncomfortable around you, and frankly, so do your father and I." "Controlling?" "Mom, I've been managing your finances at your request for 8 years. I've never controlled anything without your approval." That's exactly what someone controlling would say. Her voice took on a rehearsed quality, as if she were reading from talking points someone else had prepared. "You've made everyone feel like they need your permission to access their own money. It's unhealthy." "Their own money?" "I've never restricted anyone's access to their personal accounts. I've only managed the family holdings according to the structure we all agreed on." "You've become obsessed with power, Rebecca. It's changed you. Everyone sees it except you." My hand began to shake. I'd sacrificed my own relationships, my own plans, my own life to help them. And this was their interpretation? This is absurd. If you want to change the financial arrangement, we can discuss that professionally. But uninviting me from Christmas? My own family? "It's precisely that attitude," my mother continued, undeterred. "You think you know better than everyone else. It's making the holidays stressful for everyone." As she spoke, I noticed a critical slip. "Your father and I have already scheduled a meeting with a new financial advisor for the 26th. We need to start fresh with someone who doesn't have emotional attachments to our money." There it was, the confirmation of what I'd suspected. This wasn't about my attitude or making anyone uncomfortable. This was about removing me from financial control once they had extracted whatever remaining information they needed from me. "I see," I said, my voice suddenly calm as clarity washed over me. "And I suppose you still need me to bring the year-end portfolio summaries and access information to Christmas first, right?" Her momentary silence told me everything. "That's not." "Well, yes. It would be helpful to have those documents for the transition. But that's not why." My hands had stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over me as the pattern I'd experienced my entire life suddenly came into sharp focus. They had always taken my help, my sacrifice, my support, and then discarded me when I was no longer useful or when I didn't comply with their demands. As a child, I'd been excluded from family outings when I insisted on studying instead of participating in James's schemes. As a teenager, I'd been called selfish when I wanted to attend a summer academic program instead of staying home to help with Amanda's college applications. The pattern had never broken. I had just become better at accommodating it, at making myself smaller to fit their expectations. "Mom," I interrupted her rambling justification, "let me make sure I understand. You're uninviting me from Christmas, a family gathering I've helped host and fund for 8 years, because I make everyone uncomfortable by managing the finances you asked me to manage. But you still expect me to turn over all documentation and access before you formally remove me from my role. Is that correct?" "Don't twist my words, Rebecca. We're asking for what's rightfully ours. You can come back to family gatherings when you've adjusted your attitude and turned over the remaining documents." The ultimatum was so transparently self-serving that something broke inside me. This conditional acceptance I would be family again once I had served my purpose and surrendered my position was the last straw. Without conscious thought, I found myself opening my laptop while still on the phone. As my mother continued talking about my issues and how the family had tried to work with me, I logged into the main Mitchell Family Holdings account portal. My fingers moved almost automatically, navigating to account settings. For each major account checking, savings, investment portfolios, property management, I initiated security protocols. I froze access to the primary accounts. I changed passwords. I enabled two-factor authentication tied to my phone only. I revoked secondary access credentials. Within 3 minutes, while my mother was still listing my perceived faults and character flaws, I had effectively secured the entire Mitchell financial infrastructure against outside access. I hadn't permanently locked them out. I would never do anything illegal or truly harmful, but I had ensured that no changes could be made without my involvement and proper documentation. No new financial advisor could be granted access without my authentication. No funds could be withdrawn or transferred without proper authorization protocols that I had built into the system years ago as a security measure. Rebecca? Are you even listening to me? My mother's voice cut through my focused state. Yes, Mom, I heard everything. My voice was remarkably steady. That's fine. Enjoy your Christmas. We'll talk after the holidays. What? She sounded genuinely confused by my calm acceptance. So you'll send over the documents before the 26th? We'll discuss the proper transition process after the holidays, with appropriate legal representation for both parties. Have a Merry Christmas. I ended the call before she could respond. For several minutes, I sat in complete silence in my condo, staring at the wall. Then my phone exploded with notifications. First, my father called. I sent it to voicemail. Then James. Then Amanda. Text messages began flooding in. Dad, call your mother back immediately. This is unacceptable behavior. James. What the hell is wrong with you? You're breaking Mom's heart. Amanda, you're being so dramatic as usual. Just because you're not invited to one Christmas doesn't mean you get to have a meltdown. I silenced my phone and methodically documented everything that had happened. The call, my mother's statements, the timing of their planned meeting with a new advisor, and the actions I had taken to secure the accounts. I noted the exact times, the exact words used, and my responses. Then I called Catherine Palmer, a high-powered attorney who specialized in financial management disputes. Unlike my friend Stephanie, who had given me personal advice, Catherine was a shark in legal waters, known for her fierce protection of clients' interests. I need an emergency consultation, I told her assistant. Today, if possible. While waiting for the call back, I sat on my balcony, watching snowflakes begin to fall. Christmas lights twinkled from neighboring buildings. Families were gathering, celebrating, connecting. And I was completely alone, cut off from the only family I had ever known. Yet strangely, I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. The fog of obligation and guilt that had surrounded my family relationships was lifting, revealing hard truths I had long avoided facing. This wasn't about Christmas. It wasn't even really about money. It was about recognizing that I had built my entire identity around being useful to people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. And for the first time in my life, I had finally said, enough. I've shared the raw moment when everything changed for me. And it's a feeling many people understand, that instant when you realize your worth isn't being recognized by the people who should value you most. If you've had that clarity moment in your own life, what triggered it? What helped you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Sometimes the most painful realizations lead to the most necessary changes. By 9 the next morning, I was sitting in Catherine Palmer's elegantly appointed office on the 20th floor of the city's most prestigious law firm. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see snow continuing to fall on the city, creating a deceptively peaceful backdrop to my internal turmoil. Miss Mitchell, Catherine began, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her no-nonsense demeanor. I've reviewed the documentation you emailed last night. Walk me through your role in managing these family accounts. For the next hour, I detailed my 8 years as the Mitchell family financial manager. I explained how I had created the LLC structure to protect their assets, how I had grown their portfolio through careful investment, and how I had documented every single transaction and decision meticulously. Catherine's assistant brought in a cart with my 4 massive binders of documentation: account statements, growth charts, authorization forms, meeting minutes, investment decisions, property management records, tax filings, and more. "This is extraordinarily thorough," Catherine remarked, examining the detailed index I had maintained. "Most family financial managers don't keep records at this level of detail." "I wanted to ensure complete transparency," I explained. "Every decision is documented with supporting analysis and signed authorizations." She nodded approvingly. "Let's discuss your legal position here. You've been operating as the manager of Mitchell Family Holdings, LLC, for 8 years, with proper documentation and authorization from the principals, your parents. The way you've structured this, you have a fiduciary responsibility to manage these assets in their best interest, which your records clearly show you've done." "Exactly. I've never made a single decision that wasn't authorized or wasn't in their best financial interest." "And you've received what compensation for this role?" "None," I admitted. "It was a family obligation, not a paid position." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. 8 years of professional financial management services, provided entirely without compensation? "Miss Mitchell, that's extraordinary. A qualified financial manager with your track record would command a substantial salary for this level of service." She turned to her computer, typing rapidly. "Based on the portfolio size you're managing and standard industry rates, we're talking about services valued at approximately $90,000 to $120,000 annually. Over 8 years, that's between $720,000 and $960,000. I finished automatically. "Precisely." Catherine looked impressed. "Now, regarding your actions yesterday in securing these accounts, while drastic, they appear to be within your authority as the designated financial manager responding to an apparent attempt to circumvent proper financial protocols." "I didn't permanently lock them out," I clarified. "I simply ensured that any changes would require proper authorization and documentation, which is consistent with my fiduciary responsibility." "A reasonable and defensible position," she agreed. "Now, let's discuss how we move forward." Over the next 2 hours, we crafted a formal letter outlining terms for the transition of financial management. The document included a reasonable timeline for transition, 60 days, requirements for formal acknowledgement of my years of service, a modest financial settlement for my uncompensated work, far below market value but still significant, conditions for the orderly transfer of information and access, legal protections against defamation or false accusations, clear consequences if proper protocols weren't followed. "This is entirely reasonable," Catherine assured me, reviewing the final draft. "In fact, I would argue it's quite generous given the circumstances." She turned to face me directly. "Miss Mitchell, I've seen many family financial disputes, and I have to say, your position is unusually strong. Your documentation is impeccable. Your actions have been consistently ethical and transparent. Any court would recognize the value you've provided and the propriety of your conduct." Her words provided validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. For years, I doubted myself, wondering if my family's dismissal of my contributions meant they weren't valuable. Hearing a respected professional confirm the worth of my work was powerfully affirming. "We should prepare for various responses," Catherine continued. "Based on what you've told me, I expect initial resistance, possibly threats of legal action. These would be ill-advised on their part, but emotional reactions rarely follow logical paths." We developed contingency plans for several scenarios: outright rejection of terms, counteroffers, legal threats, attempts to access accounts through other means, or family pressure tactics. "I recommend implementing some personal security measures as well," Catherine advised. "Not because I expect anything extreme, but because high-emotion family financial disputes can sometimes lead to unexpected behaviors." Following her advice, I arranged to have my condo locks changed that afternoon and enabled additional digital security measures on my personal accounts and devices. I didn't truly believe my family would attempt anything nefarious, but the past weeks had taught me that I didn't know them as well as I thought. After leaving Catherine's office, I had a previously scheduled appointment with Dr. Rivera, my therapist. I hadn't seen her in months, but the events of the past few weeks certainly warranted professional support. What you're describing is the collapse of a dysfunctional family system, Dr. Rivera explained after I recounted recent events. You've been the enabler, the one who makes everything work despite the dysfunction. When you began setting boundaries and demanding recognition, the system reacted to preserve itself. By cutting me out, I said. Precisely. Systems resist change, especially dysfunctional ones. Your family has operated on a model where your contributions are expected but not valued. Your recent assertions of independence threatened that model. So what do I do now? You're already doing it. You're setting clear boundaries, seeking appropriate professional support, and preparing for a new definition of your family relationships. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want with them moving forward? I considered this carefully. I don't want to cut them off entirely. They're still my family. But I can't go back to being taken for granted and exploited. That's a healthy perspective. Complete estrangement isn't necessary, but a fundamental renegotiation of the relationship is. You're no longer the family fixer without needs of your own. Michael had been texting me throughout the day, checking in and offering support. That evening, he came over with dinner and a listening ear. How are you holding up? He asked, setting out containers of Thai food on my kitchen counter. Surprisingly okay, I admitted. It's like I've been carrying this enormous weight for years, and suddenly I've set it down. There's pain and grief, absolutely, but there's also relief. Michael nodded, understanding. You've been playing a role that was consuming you. Walking away from that is both liberating and terrifying. Exactly. I don't know who I am if I'm not the responsible Mitchell daughter fixing everyone's problems. Maybe that's what you get to discover now, he suggested. Who Rebecca is when she puts herself first for a change. I decided to take the next 2 days off work to focus on handling the situation. My boss, understanding the family emergency, approved the time off immediately. I spent the time reinforcing my legal position, gathering additional documentation, and preparing emotionally for the confrontation I knew was coming. On Christmas Eve, while families across the city were gathering to celebrate, I sat alone in my condo, my phone silenced as it lit up with increasingly desperate messages from my family. They had apparently discovered the frozen accounts when trying to make last-minute Christmas purchases. James's messages had evolved from angry accusations to threats of legal action. Amanda's had shifted from dismissive to manipulatively emotional, including pictures of our parents looking sad beside a Christmas tree. My father's messages remained stiffly formal, demanding I cease this childish behavior immediately. At exactly 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve, a courier delivered the formal legal letter Catherine had prepared to my parents' home. A security camera I had installed years ago as part of their home security system, which I still had access to, captured James opening the door, signing for the envelope, and then exploding in rage after reading its contents. He threw an elaborate tantrum on the front porch, crumpling the letter and kicking over a decorative holiday planter before storming back inside. I watched the silent footage with a strange detachment. The James I saw red-faced, entitled, destructive, seemed like a stranger, not the brother I had protected and supported for decades. In that moment, I realized how completely I had idealized my family, seeing them as they could be, rather than as they actually were. That night, for the first time in years, I deliberately turned off all communication devices. No phone, no laptop, no tablet. In the silence of my condo, with soft Christmas music playing and the lights of my small tree twinkling in the corner, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never truly had. I woke on Christmas morning to the gentle chiming of my reactivated phone. The screen displayed 47 missed calls, 83 text messages, and 22 voicemails. Taking a deep breath, I began sorting through them methodically, taking screenshots, and saving voicemails as evidence for Catherine. The progression told a clear story. The messages had evolved from angry demands to panicked pleas as the reality of their situation sank in. James, 8:15 p.m., Christmas Eve. You think you're so clever with your lawyer BS? I'll sue you for everything you've got. James, 11:37 p.m., Christmas Eve. The credit cards aren't working. Fix this now or I swear to God. James, 7:03 a.m., Christmas Day. Rebecca, this is serious. Mom and Dad can't access any of their accounts. What the hell did you do? Amanda's messages followed a similar trajectory. Amanda, 9:26 p.m., Christmas Eve. Oh my God, you are such a drama queen. Uninvited from one Christmas and you pull this? Amanda, 10:58 p.m., Christmas Eve. My card just got declined at Romano's. We're sitting here embarrassed in front of Carl's family. Thanks a lot. Amanda, 6:45 a.m., Christmas Day. This isn't funny anymore, Becca. Mom is crying. Is that what you wanted? My parents' messages were more restrained but equally revealing. Dad, 9:30 p.m., Christmas Eve. Rebecca, this behavior is unacceptable. Unlock the accounts immediately. Dad, 11:05 p.m., Christmas Eve. Your mother is very upset. Call me back now. Dad, 8:15 a.m., Christmas Day. We need to access the holiday fund for gifts. This is going too far. Mom, 10:17 p.m., Christmas Eve. I don't know what's gotten into you. This isn't like you, Rebecca. Mom, 7:30 a.m., Christmas Day. Please call us. We can work this out. Everyone's Christmas is ruined. The voicemails told the same story in escalating tones of disbelief, anger, and finally, desperation. It became clear that they had planned an elaborate Christmas, likely funded by the accounts I now controlled, and everything was falling apart. I sent a single text message to each of them. I have received your messages. As indicated in the letter delivered yesterday, I am prepared to discuss a proper transition of financial management after the holidays, with appropriate legal representation present for all parties. I wish you a Merry Christmas. Then the extended family began calling. Apparently, the Christmas drama had spilled beyond the immediate family. Aunt Judith. Rebecca, what's happening? Your mother says you've frozen all their accounts and they can't buy Christmas gifts for the grandchildren. Uncle Robert. Kiddo, I don't know what's going on, but your dad sounds desperate. Can you give him a call? Cousin Emily. Hey, so Christmas at your parents' is super weird right now. Everyone's whispering and your dad keeps making phone calls in the other room. What's happening? To these, I responded with simple, factual statements. After 8 years of managing my parents' finances without compensation, I was unexpectedly removed from the family Christmas gathering. I've taken steps to ensure a proper and documented transition of financial management, which will occur after the holidays with appropriate legal oversight. The responses were illuminating. Aunt Judith, who had always been kind but distant, called back immediately. Rebecca, I had no idea you've been managing their finances all these years. Your mother always made it sound like you just helped occasionally with paperwork. I've dedicated 15 to 20 hours weekly to their financial management since I was 24, I explained calmly. I've grown their net worth by 40% and saved them from bankruptcy after Dad's business partner embezzled funds. A long pause followed. I didn't know any of that. James has been telling everyone you've been controlling their money and making them ask permission for everything. I have documentation of every transaction, authorization, and decision for the past 8 years. I've never restricted their access to their funds. I've only managed them according to agreed upon parameters. By mid-afternoon, a fascinating shift was occurring. As more family members heard my side directly, the unified front against me began to crack. Aunt Judith and Uncle Robert called my parents, questioning the narrative they'd been given. Cousin Emily texted that James was freaking out and saying things that don't make sense when challenged on his version of events. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected invitation. Michael's parents, whom I had met briefly twice before, invited me to join their family Christmas dinner. Michael mentioned you might be alone today, his mother said warmly over the phone. No one should be alone on Christmas. We'd love to have you. Touched by the kindness, I accepted. The contrast between the Mitchell family Christmas I'd been excluded from and the Callahan family gathering I attended couldn't have been more stark. The Callahan home was modest compared to my parents' estate, but it radiated genuine warmth. Michael's parents, two sisters, brother-in-law, and young niece welcomed me without reservation. No one was checking their phone for financial updates or planning how to extract resources from other family members. They simply enjoyed each other's company, sharing stories, playing games, and genuinely listening to each other. Rebecca, Michael tells us you work in finance? Mr. Callahan asked during dinner. Yes, I'm an investment advisor at Sheffield Financial, I replied. That must be fascinating work, he said with genuine interest. Do you enjoy it? Such a simple question, yet I realized no one in my family had ever asked me that. They had only been interested in how my financial expertise could benefit them. I do, I answered, surprised by the emotion in my voice. I love helping people secure their futures, teaching them how money can work for them instead of controlling them. Mrs. Callahan smiled warmly. That's what matters, isn't it? Doing work that brings you fulfillment. As we were enjoying dessert, my phone lit up with an email notification from my father. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting request." The message was brief. Rebecca, this situation has gone far enough. We need to meet tomorrow to resolve this matter and restore access to our accounts. Name your time and place. This needs to end now. Dad. I showed the email to Michael when we had a private moment. He still doesn't get it, Michael observed. He's treating this like a tantrum he can shut down with authority, not a legitimate legal and ethical issue that requires proper resolution. That's how they've always dealt with me asserting any boundary, I replied. Dismiss, minimize, pressure, then eventually ignore. What will you do? I composed a response that Catherine had helped me prepare for exactly this scenario. Dear Dad, I understand this is a difficult situation for everyone. I am prepared to meet to discuss transition terms as outlined in the letter you received. However, as indicated, this meeting must include legal representation for both parties to ensure clarity and proper documentation. My attorney, Catherine Palmer, can be available on December 27th at 10 a.m. at her office. Please confirm if this works for you and your legal representation. Rebecca. I hit send and put my phone away, returning to the genuine warmth of the Callahan family gathering. For the first time in years, I experienced what a healthy family Christmas could feel like, one based on mutual respect and affection rather than obligation and exploitation. As Michael drove me home that evening, I felt a mixture of grief and hope. Grief for the family relationships I was losing, but hope for the possibility of healthier connections in the future, both with the Mitchells, if they were willing to change, and potentially with the Callahans, who had shown me such kindness. Thank you for today, I told Michael as we pulled up to my building. Your family is wonderful. They think the same about you, he said, squeezing my hand. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of how you're handling all of this. Standing up for yourself while still remaining open to reconciliation takes tremendous strength. Back in my condo, I found another email from my father, responding to my terms. We'll be there. This has gone far enough, Rebecca. No mention of bringing legal representation, no acknowledgement of the seriousness of the situation. Just the same dismissive tone, implying that my concerns were trivial and my boundaries unreasonable. I forwarded the email to Catherine with a brief note. They've agreed to meet. Prepare for them to arrive without counsel and attempt to steamroll the conversation. Her response was immediate and reassuring. Let them try. My conference room, my rules. That night, I reviewed my documentation once more, strengthening my resolve. The brief moment of doubt and grief I felt for the family relationships I had idealized was quickly replaced by determination. This wasn't about punishment. It was about finally establishing the respect and recognition I had earned through years of loyal service. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that regardless of how the meeting went, I had already achieved something profound. I had finally broken a lifelong pattern of sacrificing my own needs for people who wouldn't do the same for me. Whatever came next, that victory could never be taken away. The conference room at Palmer Legal Associates exuded quiet power. Walnut paneling, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city created an atmosphere of serious business. A deliberate choice by Catherine, who understood the psychological impact of environment on negotiations. At precisely 9:45 a.m. on December 27th, I arrived with my complete documentation organized in labeled binders. Catherine greeted me with professional warmth, her tailored charcoal suit and pearl necklace projecting exactly the image we wanted: competent, serious, and unflappable. Remember, she advised, as we arranged materials at our end of the conference table, they'll likely begin emotionally. Let them. The more they reveal about their true motivations, the stronger our position becomes. At 10:03 a.m., the receptionist announced the arrival of the Mitchell family. All four of them entered, my father leading with stern authority, my mother looking simultaneously righteous and victimized, James with barely contained anger, and Amanda projecting bored disdain. Behind them trailed a young man I didn't recognize, clutching a leather portfolio that looked brand new. "Rebecca," my father said, ignoring Catherine entirely. "This has gone far enough. We're here to end this nonsense immediately." Catherine stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Catherine Palmer, Miss Mitchell's legal counsel. Thank you for coming. May I ask who you've brought as your representation?" My father blinked, momentarily thrown off script. "This is Kevin Matthews. He's a friend of James who practices law." Kevin, who looked barely out of law school, shifted uncomfortably. "I primarily focus on real estate transactions, but I'm here to assist the Mitchell family." Catherine nodded politely. "Welcome, Mr. Matthews. Please, everyone be seated. We've prepared documentation packages for each of you." She distributed folders containing the transition proposal while I observed my family's reactions. My father's face reddened as he skimmed the contents. James flipped pages rapidly, his expression darkening. My mother sniffed dismissively without opening hers. Amanda examined her nails. "This is ridiculous," James burst out, unable to contain himself. "She's been managing our parents' money, not running a hedge fund. These terms are outrageous." Catherine remained unruffled. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps before making declarations about what is ridiculous, we should establish some facts. Miss Rebecca Mitchell has provided professional financial management services to your family for 8 years, working approximately 15 to 20 hours weekly without compensation." "That's family helping family," my father interjected. "Not some professional arrangement." "Interesting perspective," Catherine replied. "Miss Mitchell, would you please share Exhibit A?" I distributed copies of the Mitchell Family Holdings, LLC formation documents, all properly signed and notarized. "This legally established entity, which I formed at your request, Dad, explicitly names me as the financial manager with fiduciary responsibility for the family assets." "We didn't understand all that legal mumbo-jumbo," my mother said. "We just signed what you put in front of us." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you suggesting you signed legal documents without understanding their contents? Because that would raise serious questions about other financial and legal decisions you've made." My mother fell silent, realizing the trap her statement had created. "Let's be clear about what Miss Mitchell has accomplished," Catherine continued, projecting a chart on the conference room screen. "Under her management, the Mitchell family net worth has increased from $1.2 million to $1.68 million, a 40% growth during a period when many similar portfolios achieved only 15 to 20% growth." "That's just market performance," James scoffed. "Actually," I interjected, opening one of my binders, "here's the S&P 500 performance during the same period, showing 22% growth. Our portfolio outperformed the market by nearly double." I turned to the next section. "Here's documentation of the bankruptcy situation I resolved when Dad's business partner embezzled funds. Without my intervention, the family would have lost the primary residence and approximately 60% of total assets." Kevin the lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable, whispering something to James, who waved him off impatiently. Let's discuss the value of services rendered. Catherine continued smoothly. Based on standard industry rates for portfolio management of this size and complexity, comparable services would cost between $90,000 and $120,000 annually. Over 8 years, that represents a value of. This is absurd, my father interrupted. She's our daughter, not some hired financial advisor. Precisely the point, Mr. Mitchell, Catherine replied. Rebecca provided professional-level services out of family loyalty, sacrificing her own time, energy, and opportunities. Services you were happy to accept until you decided to exclude her from the family gathering while still expecting to benefit from her expertise. She projected a new slide, a timeline of my involvement, with key financial decisions, crises averted, and growth achieved. Here we see the Mitchell family financial trajectory before and after Rebecca's management began. Note the stability and consistent growth pattern compared to the previous volatility. My family sat in uncomfortable silence, the data making their position increasingly difficult to maintain. Now, Catherine continued, let's discuss the recent events. Rebecca was unexpectedly informed, 3 days before Christmas, that she was unwelcome at the family gathering. Simultaneously, she discovered plans to remove her as financial manager immediately after extracting final account information from her at Christmas. When she took reasonable steps to secure the accounts pending proper transition, she was subjected to harassment, threats, and defamation from family members. That's not, James began, but Catherine cut him off by playing a recording of one of his voicemails. You think you're so clever with your lawyer BS? I'll sue you for everything you've got. The recording continued with more threats and accusations, revealing the true nature of their response. James's face flushed crimson, with embarrassment or rage, possibly both. Given these circumstances, Catherine concluded, Rebecca has proposed extremely reasonable terms for transition, including 1. A 60-day orderly transition period. 2. A modest compensation of $180,000 for 8 years of service, representing less than 25% of market value. 3. Formal acknowledgement of her contributions. 4. Cessation of defamatory statements. 5. Continued limited advisory role with appropriate compensation if desired. These terms are not only reasonable, but generous, given the circumstances. My father's face had turned from red to a concerning purple shade. We're not paying her to do what any decent daughter would do for her family. Dad, I said quietly, speaking directly to my family for the first time, would you work for free for 8 years, giving up evenings, weekends, and relationships to help someone else? Would you expect James or Amanda to do that? His momentary silence was answer enough. You've taken advantage of my sense of family obligation for years, I continued. I'm not asking for the full value of my services. I'm asking for reasonable recognition of my contribution and a proper, professional transition. We can't access our own money, Amanda interjected. How is that reasonable? The accounts aren't permanently locked, I explained patiently. They're secured pending proper transition protocols, exactly as the LLC operating agreement requires. The agreement you all signed. Kevin finally spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I need to advise you that Miss Mitchell's position appears legally sound. The documentation is comprehensive, and the terms proposed are indeed quite moderate given the circumstances. James shot him a betrayed look. Whose side are you on? I'm trying to give sound legal advice, Kevin replied, visibly uncomfortable. Based on what I'm seeing, pursuing litigation would be costly and unlikely to succeed. Catherine nodded approvingly at the young lawyer. Mr. Matthews is correct. Additionally, litigation would require public disclosure of all financial records and family communications. I imagine that's not an outcome anyone desires. My parents exchanged glances, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They requested a private moment to confer, and Catherine graciously offered them use of a small adjacent meeting room. While they were gone, Catherine gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You're doing extremely well. Stay calm and keep focused on the facts. When my family returned 15 minutes later, The dynamic had subtly shifted. My father, though still visibly unhappy, had adopted a more businesslike demeanor. "We're prepared to discuss your terms," he said stiffly, with some modifications. The real negotiation began. For the next 2 hours, we worked through each point of the agreement. My father tried to reduce the compensation amount, arguing it was excessive. Catherine calmly compared it to market rates, showing it was actually quite modest. They eventually agreed to the full amount but requested payment in installments over 2 years, which I accepted. The acknowledgement of my contribution was another sticking point. James resisted any formal recognition, revealing his deeper resentment. "She's been holding this over our heads for years," he complained. "Always the responsible one, always making us feel like we can't manage without her." "Is that how you see it, James?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because from my perspective, I've been drowning in responsibility while watching you pursue whatever interested you, with full family support." Amanda, surprisingly, spoke up. "She's not wrong, James. Mom and Dad have always bailed you out when your businesses failed, while expecting Rebecca to fix everything." James glared at her. "Whose side are you on?" "I'm just saying, maybe we haven't been entirely fair," she replied, not meeting his eyes. This crack in their unified front was unexpected. As the negotiation continued, I noticed Amanda becoming increasingly quiet, observing the proceedings with a thoughtful expression I'd rarely seen on her face. My parents, realizing their position was weakening, gradually moved toward accepting the core terms. The breakthrough came when my father, after a particularly compelling presentation of the financial growth I'd achieved, reluctantly acknowledged reality. "Fine," he said, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion. "You did a good job with the accounts, better than I could have done. Is that what you want to hear? I want you to recognize that I've dedicated years of my life to protecting and growing the family finances," I replied calmly, "and that I deserve basic respect for that contribution, not exclusion and accusations." A heavy silence followed. Then my father nodded once, a brief, almost imperceptible movement. "The terms are acceptable. We'll sign." Catherine efficiently produced the formal agreement, which all parties reviewed and signed. The process was completed by early afternoon, establishing a clear timeline and procedure for the transition. As we prepared to leave, Amanda approached me hesitantly. "Rebecca, can we talk sometime? Just the two of us?" "Sure," I replied, surprised by the request. "Call me next week." My parents left without further conversation, their expressions a mixture of resignation and lingering resentment. James stormed out ahead of them, not bothering to say goodbye. Once they were gone, I felt a strange mixture of emotions wash over me. Relief, vindication, sadness, and something else, a sense of liberation I hadn't expected. Tears I'd been holding back for hours suddenly spilled over. Catherine, with surprising gentleness from someone so formidable, handed me a tissue. "You did extraordinarily well, Rebecca. Not many people could have maintained such composure in the face of family pressure." "Thank you," I managed, wiping my eyes. "For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "You had the strength and the documentation," she replied. "I just provided the forum and some strategic guidance." As we gathered the materials, Catherine offered her professional assessment. "Based on what I observed today, I believe they'll comply with the terms. Your father, despite his resistance, is fundamentally pragmatic, and your documentation was simply too comprehensive to fight." I nodded, still processing the events of the day. "What happens now?" "Now, you begin the transition process as outlined in the agreement, and you continue building your life on your own terms, not theirs." As I left the office building, I found Michael waiting in the lobby, a quiet, supportive presence. He asked no questions, simply opening his arms, offering comfort without demands or expectations. In that moment, I realized that while I had lost something today, the illusion of an idealized family, I had gained something far more valuable. The beginning of a life defined by mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. Has your family ever taken advantage of your kindness or expertise? I've learned that setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting people off. It means establishing the respect you deserve. If my story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more real-life family drama and resolution stories. Drop a comment sharing how you've handled similar situations or what you would have done in my place. I read all your comments and would love to hear your experiences with family karma and finding justice in complicated relationships. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. Sometimes the hardest family lessons lead to the most important growth. 1 month after the negotiation, we gathered at Morton's Steakhouse, a neutral location chosen for its private dining rooms. The transition of financial management was proceeding according to schedule, and this meeting was to formalize the next phase and sign additional documentation. I arrived first, deliberately choosing a seat that allowed me to see everyone entering. Catherine had coached me on these small psychological advantages. Maintaining physical awareness and control of my environment helped reinforce my new position in the family dynamic. My parents arrived precisely on time, dressed formally, as if for a business meeting rather than a family gathering. My mother's pinched expression suggested she was still struggling with our new reality, while my father maintained the stiff professionalism he had adopted during the negotiation. Amanda arrived a few minutes later, offering me a tentative smile as she took the seat beside me, a choice that clearly surprised our parents. James was noticeably absent, having refused to attend. According to Amanda, he was still processing things, which I interpreted as sulking after not getting his way. The restaurant staff served water and took drink orders as we engaged in awkward small talk about the unusually mild January weather. Once they departed, my father cleared his throat and opened his leather portfolio, signaling the beginning of the formal discussion. "We've reviewed the transition documentation with our new financial advisor," he began. "Everything seems in order. The access protocols you've established are thorough." "Thank you," I replied evenly. I wanted to ensure a seamless transition with proper security measures. We proceeded through the agenda methodically, signing the acknowledgement of completed transition phases, reviewing the timeline for remaining steps, and confirming the first installment of my compensation had been properly transferred. Throughout the process, I maintained the professional demeanor I had cultivated during the negotiation, neither cold nor overly familiar. This wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about establishing a new, healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. As the business portion concluded and dinner was served, Amanda suddenly spoke up. "I want to say something." She took a deep breath, her fingers nervously playing with her napkin. "Rebecca, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind our family usually gives, where we just move on and pretend nothing happened." My parents stiffened, but Amanda continued. "I've been thinking a lot about how we've treated you over the years, especially me. I took for granted that you would always be there to fix everything, that you existed to solve our problems. I never considered what it cost you." The sincerity in her voice caught me by surprise. "Thank you, Amanda. That means a lot to me. I've been talking to a therapist," she continued, avoiding our parents' shocked expressions. "After everything that happened, I started questioning other patterns in our family. The way James and I were encouraged to pursue whatever we wanted, while you were expected to be responsible for everyone. The way we dismissed your contributions because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging our own selfishness." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Amanda, this is hardly the time or place for—" "Actually, Mom," Amanda interrupted with newfound assertiveness, "this is exactly the time and place. We're trying to establish a new family dynamic, aren't we? Doesn't that require honesty?" The table fell silent. My father studied his steak intently, while my mother pressed her lips into a thin line of disapproval. "I appreciate your honesty, Amanda," I said, breaking the tense silence. "I never wanted to cut ties with any of you. I just needed basic respect and recognition." "Well," my father said gruffly, "you certainly have our attention now." The comment could have been interpreted as resentful, but I chose to take it at face value. "That's all I ever wanted, Dad. To be seen as a valuable contributor, not just the reliable daughter you could take for granted." The remainder of the dinner proceeded with a strange mixture of formal politeness and occasional moments of genuine connection. As we prepared to leave, Amanda asked if we could meet for coffee the following week, a suggestion I readily accepted. My parents maintained their stiff formality, but I noticed subtle shifts. My father actually thanked me for organizing the transition documents so clearly. My mother, when saying goodbye, held my gaze for a moment longer than usual, a flicker of something regret, perhaps, or simply recognition passing across her face. As the weeks passed, the transition continued according to plan. I attended meetings with their new financial advisor, Lawrence Bennett, a competent professional who seemed genuinely impressed by the systems I had established. Most family financial setups aren't nearly this organized, he commented during one transition meeting. You've created quite a sophisticated management structure. My parents, observing this professional validation of my work, began to show subtle signs of reassessing their perspective. They listened more attentively during explanations, asked more thoughtful questions, and occasionally acknowledged specific achievements in my management approach. 6 months after the Christmas confrontation, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, ironically, the same location where Nathan had proposed years earlier. This time, however, I accepted without reservation, secure in the knowledge that I was choosing a partner who respected my boundaries and supported my growth. We hosted an engagement party at Michael's parents' home, a casual backyard gathering with string lights and homemade food. To my surprise, my entire family attended, including James, who had gradually emerged from his resentful isolation. The Mitchell family arrived together, bearing a gift basket and making polite conversation with the Callahans. They remained somewhat reserved, clearly uncomfortable in this unfamiliar environment where they weren't the center of attention, but they made a genuine effort to participate. James approached me while I was arranging dessert plates on the patio table. "Nice party," he said awkwardly, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm glad you could come." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with whatever he wanted to say. "Look, I'm not good at this stuff, but I was wrong about some things. The app I was so excited about, total bust. Turns out the developers were all talk, no substance." I nodded, understanding this was as close to an apology as James could currently manage. "Technology ventures are always risky. Maybe next time, let me review the business plan before you invest too deeply." "Yeah, maybe." He gave a half smile. "You were always better at spotting the details I missed." This small acknowledgement, though far from a complete reconciliation, represented significant progress from the angry accusations of 6 months earlier. As the seasons changed, so did the Mitchell family dynamic. My parents gradually accepted that our relationship had fundamentally transformed. I was no longer the dutiful daughter sacrificing everything for their comfort, but an independent adult with boundaries and expectations of mutual respect. They struggled with this new reality, occasionally slipping into old patterns of expecting me to drop everything for family needs. Each time, I gently but firmly reinforced the new boundaries, and slowly, they began to adapt. Amanda's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. Our weekly coffee meetings evolved into a genuine friendship as she explored her own role in the family system and began establishing her own independence. "I've withdrawn from the Paris PhD program," she told me one afternoon over lattes. "I realized I was just using it to avoid figuring out what I actually want to do with my life." "That's a big decision," I observed. "What will you do instead?" "I'm looking into nonprofit management," she replied. "I've been volunteering at this educational foundation and it feels meaningful, you know? Like I'm contributing something valuable instead of just consuming resources." The pride in her voice as she described her work revealed a new Amanda, one who found satisfaction in productivity rather than endless consumption. A year after the Christmas that changed everything, we gathered for a family dinner at a restaurant Michael had recommended. James brought his new girlfriend, a practical accountant named Sarah, who seemed to have a calming influence on his more impulsive tendencies. Amanda came directly from her new job at the Educational Foundation, excited to share news about a successful grant application she had helped develop. My parents, now settled into their new financial management arrangement, seemed more relaxed than I had seen them in years. Without the burden of managing their finances, I could simply enjoy their company, listening to my father's stories and my mother's community gossip, without the undercurrent of obligation that had previously colored every interaction. As we finished dessert, my father raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice carrying an unusual note of emotion. "To family, not perfect, sometimes downright dysfunctional, but still family." We clinked glasses, the simple gesture symbolizing something profound. A family transformed not by pretending problems didn't exist, but by confronting them honestly and establishing new patterns of interaction. Later that evening, as Michael and I walked home through the crisp December air, he squeezed my hand. "You know what I just realized? This will be your first Christmas with your family since the big freeze-out. Are you ready for that?" I considered the question carefully. "I think so. It won't be perfect. There will probably be moments of tension and old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But it's different now. I'm different." "How so?" he asked. "I used to think family meant sacrifice, giving everything and expecting nothing in return. Now I understand that true family means mutual respect. It means recognizing each other's value and contributions. It means healthy boundaries and honest communication." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "The Mitchell family, version 2. I smiled at that. "Exactly. And this version has proper update protocols and security features built in." As we reached our building, a text message arrived from my cousin Emily. "Christmas at your parents' this year. Should I expect drama, or are we past that now?" I typed back, "We're working on a new family operating system. Occasional bugs, but overall much more stable." That evening, I received a call from another cousin asking if I would help manage her family's investments. For a moment, I felt the old pattern trying to reassert itself, the responsible Rebecca, the family fixer, the one who sacrifices her own needs for others. But now I recognized it for what it was. "I'm not taking on any family financial management," I told her gently but firmly, "but I can recommend some excellent professional advisors who provide that service." As I ended the call, I felt a profound sense of peace. The pattern was broken, not just temporarily, but permanently. I had established not only a new relationship with my family, but a new relationship with myself, one based on self-respect and healthy boundaries, rather than endless self-sacrifice. The uninvitation from last Christmas, painful as it had ultimately given me the most valuable gift possible: the courage to stand up for my worth and the wisdom to create relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. In many ways, it was the best Christmas gift I had ever received. Family relationships are complicated, aren't they? Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the healthiest changes. I'd love to know if my story resonated with you. Have you ever had to completely reset a family dynamic to make it healthier? Drop a comment below sharing your experience or what you might have done differently in my situation. If you found value in this story of standing up for yourself while still maintaining family connections, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life family journey stories. I'm grateful for this supportive community and read every comment. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and your family in the long run.